today we'll talk more about data quality, data standards, and some analytics. But I just wanted to rehash, the basic tenet of database design is build it with the user in mind. That said, we all know a few states have a statewide student information system. Most states have a lot of student information systems, a lot of vendors. You have a lot of different software tools that you're entering in: library, food service, transportation, faculty, finance. And a lot of these databases or the software systems were built many years ago when all we really thought about in education was compliance reporting, going up to the state and the feds. And in the district, you're doing a lot more analysis. Well, 21st century comes, we've got technology, powerful technology. Everyone wants more data to make decisions with. Totally support that. But we're doing it with data collected sometimes on 25-year-old systems, like what the presenter said the other day in Philly. Their student information system, is just band-aided together. So while we're getting all excited about, we can do this with data, we can get this data, we can do these dashboards and all that, we have to understand that the original systems might have been built for totally different purposes for far few users. And so now we're trying to max it out and trying to figure out how to do that with integrity, with high quality data. So while many things were built a long time ago, we still need to be able to adapt them and think of them not as we built a database, therefore it's done, more like it's a living, breathing, dynamic system that needs to be adapted year in and year out. And that said, we're building dashboards with the user in mind. We're building reports with the user in mind. The parents, the administrators, everyone's asking for more. So it's always, what can we do with the user in mind while understanding that our resources, our staff and our money and our time isn't getting bigger. They're often going the opposite way. So how can we maximize reports and use and using the data quality for the most audiences at the same time, if we can. So, and the other thing is build it with the user in mind and how the data will be used. And we're maxing that out. We're stretching the limits of what we thought we were going to do with data in education. I just kind of wanted to go through the data flow. How many of you are data entry folks in a district or a school? And DBAs or, okay. And then users in the schools or district? Who are the rest of you?
Tech director.
Tech director.
You didn't say all everything.
All everything, yeah. Other duties as assigned? Yeah. Gotcha. So let me just go through a very high level flow from the raw to the refined data. As you all know, let me see if I can do this. I'm trying not to move around too much for the camera. Whoops. Okay, we've got in the red side, we've got our data sources. Many are at the school or district level. Some come from outside. Lots of different student information systems. Your assessment may not be in your, that's a whole different vendor. College board data comes from outside. Some states get it. I don't know if district folks get your own ACT, SAT contracts. NAEP, gradebook, federal program staff. You all know this, you're living it. There's just a plethora of data sources. How do we make sense of it? Once we send whatever we send to the state, how does PDE make sense of it through PIMS? How do they extract, transfer load, do all of the cleansing, have a data warehouse? With the EdFi dashboards that were just piloted last year, there's an operational data store where your data goes into that. There's just a whole lot of IT buckets and processes, and it's still a long way from somebody like me. I spent 4 years at the Texas Education Agency as a researcher analyst, and then I was at a nonprofit where we took the TEA data and did a lot of school improvement charts and graphs back 10 years ago, 14, 15 years ago, before people were really trying to to analyze the heck out of the little bit of data we have. There's a whole lot of technology back there and a lot of things happen, as you know, before any of us users actually touch it and start analyzing it. Once you get it in these warehouses, we start building the queries, the reports. You have portals, and different states are doing different things around portals. You know, there's a lot of portals that send the data back to the teachers and the schools and districts. I know in Georgia they've created a single sign-on process into their SLDS so that rather than giving you all 14 different sign-ons for every different portal and data source, they have created a single sign-on, and they get automatically connected to the state data warehouse and all of the reports from there. States are learning from each other. We have national conferences at the state level, and they are trying to learn from each other and pull each other's codes and stuff. But there's also, you know, in the State Department of Ed, the federal program area people, they need databases. In some states I go to, they get an Excel sheet, you know, from their state's version of PIMS. Or they might get an Access data sheet. Where I was at Texas, it was back, dating myself, but we were on a mainframe. And we had access, you know, through SAS to the mainframe where we touched all the relational databases. So there's lots of ways to go about this and start giving different people access to the data. And you think in terms of the internal, external uses and uses. We've got ad hoc analyses. You know, the legislature calls and asks for information. The governor calls, the chief calls. Those get pretty quick attention. You know, parents want things. We've got the school report cards online. The feds definitely want their data. There's multiple collections through the year for the feds. External researchers, most states are, and I think PDE has a process where research organizations can submit requests for data, either aggregate or they can try individual. That's getting harder and harder, but for protection of privacy. And when I talk to states, two of the biggest data requesters are grad students and the press. And it makes it hard for the states because they often don't know what exactly they want. So they ask for the world, and then they say, well, that's not how I want it. Can you send it this way? So it's a long, tedious, and often resource-intensive process to work through that. All said, there's a lot of users, and there's a lot of steps to go from this raw data, and it's, you know, where you enter it all the way through, trying to get something useful, trying to get useful information. Researchers like me, we want the data sets, but a lot of people just need the information from it, and that's not easy to get to. So some of the data sources we combine, we create aggregate statistics. It's easier to share with that. Again, data sources, the SIS's assessment, a lot of, well, I know states actually submit surveys to districts, you know, because they have federal grants or they have grants from foundations. Anybody who gives you money is going to want some data, some evaluation of it. So you do surveys of a subset of districts. Or I know in Texas, they collect data from the districts through their version of PIMS, it's PIMS, 4 times a year. Well, if you need data today and the next collection isn't until August, they're going to send a survey, even though PIMS might have the same data. It's a matter of timing. And we are talking at the state level of how to reduce all these data collections because the burden on districts is huge. But again, a lot of different data sources. The federal EDFACS is the compliance reporting. They have multiple collections throughout the year on a lot of different topics, normally at the school, district, and state level. So they want everything delineated 3 different ways. You know, the AYP, the state assessment enrollment, graduation rate, dropout rate. Demographic information, teacher evaluation information. And then the external researchers, they're going to want a subset on a wide variety of topics, looking at retention, school improvement indicators, impact of high mobility, slicing and dicing it. a lot. So how do we make sure that the data that we put into our systems is formatted in a way that you can aggregate it and use it for all these different uses and users reliably, validly? The way to make sure that you're getting all the same data from every school and district is to have data standards, really good, robust data standards, so that allows you to map and align the data from different sources together, and consistency. And I will say, I've worked with a variety of states, not all of whom, we've spent 10 years around the country building these SLDSs, the statewide longitudinal data systems. It's only been about 4 or 5 years that we've really started talking about common education data standards across the states. Because you think about it, there are kids not just that move a lot within Pennsylvania across districts, there are kids who move across state lines, and people are saying, well, how can we share data across state lines and make sure and use it, make sure that we can map it to each other and analyze it, and figure out what courses they need to go into, what programs they need to go to. There's some states that don't have these data standards within them, or they think they do. There's a document that says, here's how to calculate this or report this, here's our code values. And I did work in a state a couple years ago, and I did focus groups with superintendents and their technology folks. And they said, I'm doing my best to make sense of this document. And I'm sending what I think is the data element you're asking for, but I'm pretty sure my interpretation is different than these other districts. And so it makes you think, what's the quality of the data? The numbers may look right. They're within the realm of reasonableness, if face value. But do they really mean the same thing? And we all know we're using the data. The legislature, the whoever, we're sending reports. And so you have to question, what is the quality of the data? And that depends upon the data standards. How easy is it for you all in every different district to look at this and come to the same conclusion about what data you need to send? So a lot of work is going on around the country around establishing good data dictionaries, good data standards, and keeping them up to date. Basically, a data standard is a common vocabulary. You've got your element names, definitions, options sets. Ideally, we're collecting the data at the most granular level. We're taking the calculation out of your hand, and then the state does all the aggregation to make sure that it's done the same way across all districts and schools, charter schools. When I say districts, I include all possibilities. So for example, you all know PIMS better than me, but I just kind of collected a few screenshots of things like, how do you do male, female? Pennsylvania, it's MF. Some states it might be 1.0 or 1.2 or, a numeric value. How do you do address? How do you do dates? Is it year, or month, day? Is it date, month, day, year? You've all got to make sure that you send it in the same way. I like this one, race, ethnicity code. Normally I would probably think, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Well, we go 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10. And there's a reason for that. As we developed over time, I'm sure the federal you had to change that. But if you're a brand new to education, you're in a school, you're entering data, that might not be the most logical thing. And that's why the data standards have to be so clear. Free and reduced lunch, it might be a yes, no somewhere. Here it's FRN. The LEP status. That was interesting. Again, I was thinking, okay, 1, 0, yes, no. Depending upon the situation, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different codes. That's why the data standards have to be so clear, so that you take every question out of the data entry person's hands, and they don't have to make a best guess. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but so when we get through the data element, and ideally in the data standards, you're covering the name, a good definition to make it really clear, real clear option codes, code table, length format, patterns, how you set these up. Any special instructions or business rules. You don't want to have a 6-year-old 12th grader in your data set. You know, you want to take the effect of typos out as much as you can. And then the formula. If it is a calculated value like attendance rate or whatever rate, be explicit in your data standards how to calculate that rate so that you all calculate it the same way, and what to do with the exceptions. So just to review, you all I know live and die with PIMS manuals. Your SIS vendors, I'm sure they have manuals or code books. The feds, as I said, 4 or 5 years ago, really started with this common education data standards. They've worked with SEAs, LEAs, higher ed, and pre-K, I should add them, and I think workforce. A lot of robust input from the stakeholders, and it's been established and active long enough that a lot of the vendors are getting engaged, and when they come out with a new release, the vendors look at it, and I think they're aligning more. The SIF Association is aligning with them. So hopefully this will become a good, robust source of data standards, but you already have your software in place. And so at this point you're mapping to, and as you adapt your data collections, you can use the Common Education Data Center, but right now there's a whole lot of mapping and aligning when it comes to data use. So data quality. So when I was at the Texas Education Agency, for most of my time there, I was in the research and evaluation unit and doing, back before so much compliance reporting, we actually could do some research, but we also did the state mandated reports, dropout, retention, graduation, so forth. But my last year there, I was in, it was called School Accountability and Accreditation at the time. I'm sure it's changed names 3 times since then. But it was really fun. I got to, you know, with federal programs, there is or was a requirement that every district had to be visited every 3 years to make sure everything's up, and we looked at the data. Texas has over 1,200 districts, not many staff. So we worked on a way to analyze the data and try to identify the districts most at risk or with most questionable data, leading maybe to most questionable processes. And we came up with a 4-point risk-based system to identify districts that, man, you absolutely had a site visit, or maybe you could do a phone call, a desk audit, or this is really not at risk, and, you know, try to manage the staff and resources. So we analyzed the data by different program areas, by GT, by absences on test dates, because at the time we had a test day, you know, or not even a 2-week period, there was a test day. So who's absent, who's excused, you know, are there schools or districts that are saying, letting a high percentage be gone on test day, because that affects your accountability rating in the state. So we did a lot of slicing and dicing, which was really interesting. And then as the findings came out, as we shared with your district, here's your results, I got the call saying that data doesn't reflect my kids, you know. And, you know, one of them was, I think, this district had 3 Native Americans. This guy's like, we have 0. And I have the data. I could look at the student and say, here are these 3 people. And he said, they are not. And you know, and at that point I said, I appreciate that. I can only use the data I have. Your data entry, you need a process of checking. Because at this point, schools and districts, schools enter data, districts, our regional service centers often provide data quality checking before it all gets submitted to the state. There's a lot of steps. And there was at the time a window of, here's the submission, here's TEA does a whole lot of data cleansing. We send back reports of things you might need to look at, but at some point there's a signature date and it's drop dead and you don't change the data anymore. Well, this got past it, and it was affecting, you know, site visits. It might affect accountability. So there's a lot of data quality checking that needs to go on from school district all the way up through the line. One of the other things I did in that job was what we kind of internally called the Truth Squad. We had 4 people, I think the funding for them went away, but who at the time, I would run analysis again on assessments. Do you have excessive absences? Do you have a high number of kids classified as special ed? What are the out of bounds, unexpected things that we see in the data that may represent data quality issues, may represent programmatic issues, or may reflect reality, but something that deserved a bigger check? And so these 4 people, if there was something that really was called into question, they would go on site. And sometimes it's like, no, it's all good. This is reality. Sometimes they went and realized every school was using a different form for when kids moved from one school to another. And so the data quality was really questionable. And then one school had the same signature on all forms no matter what, and so it really called into question their processes. So anyway, I've got to do a lot of interesting data quality checks and thinking through that, and it helps you figure out what's a data quality issue versus a program issue. It may help decision makers in there. So I just went through and came up with some examples of some data quality checks that I've done over the time, and I want to hear from you all, see what standard checks you all do or think might be done, and all of this is to help inform you. Help you think of new ways to doing things, or maybe old ways. So anyway, data quality issues, clearly defining the data standards. You've got to receive the data format in the same way, every district, every school, every student, everything. We've got to have consistency. And really, besides the fact that people are using this information, and so it needs to be right in order to have credibility and integrity, we need to make sure that we're minimizing the amount of processing time in your jobs and at PDE, because no one has the staff to spend as much time doing all of this stuff. You all have other activities you need to do. So how can we minimize the amount of time doing data quality checks, ensuring that the data can be used the way we want it to be used, and get it out as fast as possible. So I highlighted this the other day, but how do we ensure high quality data, or what are the facets of high quality data? Timeliness. You've got to meet your timelines, because at some point PDE is going to publish a report whether your data is in there or not. They're just hard cut timelines. You also want to allow yourself the time to do your own checking and allow all the PDE and everyone else to do some data quality checking so that you can update it. Accuracy, the degree of conformity, precision, correct representation of the data, consistency and reliability. If I collect it over and over again, you send in a lot of the same data year in and year out, maybe quarterly. Are you going to see consistent numbers? And then the validity. Is this data, does it actually represent what you say it's going to represent? If you have a measure of, ear size, you don't want, inches of nose. You need to measure what you say you're going to measure to have credibility with your audience. So some of the data quality checks that I used to run, of course, looking at business rules, and you can automate a lot of those pretty quickly. Checking those expected values, the outliers, year-to-year trends, comparing schools within a district or district to district, not necessarily that you're going to have the same numbers, but that you're kind of in the same range. Again, looking for outliers. And then underreported or overreported, and this comes from, in Texas at one point, instead of just getting the graduation and dropout rate, they started a process where every student who left your school or district within a school year had to be reported as with an exit code. You went to another school, you went to your home country, you graduated, you dropped out, whatever, 30 different codes. The first year we did this, we always checked for underreported and overreported, but the first year, that was a mess. It's like buying a car the first year. They say don't do it the first year of the model because they're still working out the kinks. Data collections are the same way. And so what we did was if districts said, these 5 kids moved to this district, well, we have the student level information, so over the summer checking the next year, we could see where they showed up or if they didn't show up. And so some reported them as moving to a district, but we never saw them again. So they're dropouts, and some reported them as dropouts, but we found them in another school or district, so we could take it back. And again, this stuff affects accountability. So a lot of different types of checks. So some of the business rules, checking PIMS, you shouldn't have special ed equals no and a challenge type in there. I mean, because that's saying here's some type of a disability even though they're special ed. That's a basic one. But again, you're typing in data fast, probably with a lot of distractions, might happen. CTE indicator, if it's a yes, you can't have it be at an occupational or comprehensive CTC school. A lot of this you can automate. A 6-year-old 12th grader or something like that. So here's one, expected values. And again, you're in Pennsylvania, these are the codes for your race ethnicity codes. But sometimes you might have and I don't know your data entry, so I don't know if you actually have to enter in the code value and the number, but I can imagine somebody new coming in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or, you might have that. And so if it's in this column, your automated collection is just going to assign this number with this category, by row and number, whereas really, you don't know if this 3 is meant to be a 4 or was it meant to be a 3. When you get the data, you really have to do these frequency checks to make sure you're getting reasonable data. And then we also want to check the values. So for example, in Campus A, if we got all the right codes and we got these values, you submit these values, PIMS takes it up. It's not a negative number. I mean, it's something reasonable, formatted, and you just take it up and that's fine. Well, what if you look year to year and in 2011, 2012, these numbers were reversed? How do you know which one is which? Do you assume what was entered every year is correct? Or if you did year-to-year checks, could you use trend analysis to maybe identify some typos? And I'm not sure what PIMS does. I'm not sure what the districts do. But I bring this up because one year, again, after everyone had signed off and our data was final, some district called and said, we got this report and it's wrong. It says we have 600 Native Americans and 5 whites, and it's in East Texas, and I promise you there were not 5 Native Americans, much less 600s. Somebody flipped the codes, and it made it all the way through. Well, once it's done in Texas, it's done for years. So every year, it's going to be like that. So that's why some of our business rule checks were to look across years. And so you can see, if you even look across 3 years, you can see this is probably just a typo. Outliers, again, graduation rate, you submit a rate, different high school. This would be awesome to have 100%, right? This would be really scary to have 45%. Do you just accept it? Or do you have year-to-year comparisons so you might see how reasonable it is? So this 45 is reasonable if you look at multiple years. The 100 might still be, because if it was 92 the year before, I don't know. These are the things where, is it a quality check? Is it a data quality issue? Is it a program? If it really is 100%, what the heck did they do? Go to that school and figure out what they're doing. And I already talked about the underreported, overreporting. So let me go through some of the data analytics. And I apologize if this seems basic to some of you, but you kind of want to go basic and then go from there. Some of the data analysis for both data quality and decision making or understanding your programs, you've got to, as we've said, look for questionable trends over time. Look for data quality issues, as we did in Texas. Which which districts or schools might need a site visit or a phone call if you've got persistent data quality issues or questions. It might be within a given program area, or it might be just random all over what's going on. Look for possible issues. Is there a grade or subject issue? Is it a curriculum issue? Is it a 5th grade math teacher issue or a cohort of students? What's going on? And I love trend analysis so that you get the big picture. But here's one thing, and I remember this from Texas. We had one, we're looking at percentage of students by race, ethnicity who receive special ed services. This one district always had just an incredibly high number of kids compared to other districts of special ed students. And the first time I saw it, I panicked. Well, it turns out that they have a special facility, really well-known facility, that a lot of kids just go to that school. So it was not abnormal to see high numbers for them unless it was your first time and you panicked. But what if we look in a given district and see just a high rate of African American compared to Hispanic or white? Is that really real? Is that a typo? Is that profiling? What's going on? And so I think when you kind of start either making bar charts or line charts and looking at the trends of these things or compare different groups, it can help as a data quality issue. It can help you identify problems. It might be a programmatic issue, or it might be, here, this is the makeup of this school or this district. It might be reality. And so this is where I guess my bias is, don't just look at the data you submit and say, okay, you met all the categories, you met the definition, it's not an outlier. Let's look at the meaning of the data, the practical meaning of the data. Percentages, so here we have the numbers from District A that I just showed you. Well, here's all the other districts. So again, if you look at it this way, what's going on in District A? Is there a problem, or is it a special needs school? And you can answer that question, and if it's not a special needs school, you use the data to dig further. Looking at dropout rates, and again, I don't know about the reasonableness of this, but by different programs, bilingual, LEP, CTE, special ed, so consistently the bilingual is higher. I'm just making that up. I'm not trying to be inciting anything. But then, man, in District C, they've got, a much lower dropout rate. Do you check, is it a data quality issue? Or do you find out what they're doing differently with that population and maybe figure out what you can do? So doing data quality checks can help both as a quality or running programs. And then if you look at special ed in District D, they've got a higher than average dropout rate. What's going on there? This is the one that I realized I included CTE, but then I've got grades 3 through 8. I looked at it this morning, I thought, well, I don't know. So let's pretend this says Title I. If you're looking at this chart and saying, okay, we're following a cohort of kids in District A, well, it's not a cohort, it's different kids in each grade. No, let me look at what I was thinking. Okay, reading passing rate. Yeah. What questions would you ask if you saw this data?
What's happening in grade 6?
Right? Especially to the now Title I kids. I mean, it's a deeper thing. But even, what about grade 8? Yeah. And we know, going from grade 5 to 6, that is no easy thing for teachers or students, I think. But yeah, is something going, is it a data entry issue? Or is it the grade 6 test? Or is it the reading curriculum in this particular district? I mean, it could be many things, and only by looking at the data would you know. Looking at the data this way would you know, not just within year snapshot, but across cohorts, across years, whatever. Can you say, oh, something might be going on? Is it a teacher? Sorry, did I interrupt somebody? Any other thoughts on this one, what it might be? So this, at a nonprofit I was at, we used to publish what we called school information charts by grade and subject, and we looked at 8th grade passing rates by students who passed the 5th grade, and then also 8th grade passing rates by students who failed the 5th grade test. This is where we really started looking longitudinally, and we talked to a lot of teachers, and they said, you know, if you look just within 1 year, you're accounting for everyone, but a whole lot of these kids move into our school, you know, after October 1st, or they've been in another school for years, we just got them, we're not responsible. So we said, well, who are you responsible? How many years does it take for you to own them? And they said, you know, if you would look at just the kids who stayed in our school or district, depending upon the analysis, for 3 years, then you can say, yeah, that's us, that's our curriculum, that's our teachers, and take that mobility issue out. And so we did all sorts of charts by grade and subject, by different demographics, and then would compare those schools to the average of the top 10 performers across the state who had similar or harder to educate kids, you know, more minority, more low income, more LEP, whatever. And so when we started putting up these charts and following these kids and breaking it down by not just here's your average 8th grade passing score, but here's your average for kids who passed in 5th and here's your average for kids who didn't pass, which the basic message is if they didn't pass in the 5th, what are you gonna do to get them up to snuff in the 8th? So anyway, so here's some of the charts, you know, looking at the highly mobile, and we could define that as 3 moves or more, 2 moves or more, I don't know, not mobile, and then all the students. And you can kind of see a pattern. But what's going on in 8th grade with the highly mobile? Is it that they just finally had too many moves? You know, again, is it a data issue? Is it a program issue? What can the school or district do to help the highly mobile if all the trend analysis shows they're hitting a wall in 8th grade? How do you use this information to help? So here's the 8th grade passing rates for students who didn't pass the 5th grade. You know, they didn't pass 5th grade, they got 45, 35%, whatever. And they even go down when they hit middle school. And then in 8th grade, this group goes down, the mobile goes down again. What's going on data-wise, program-wise? What do y'all think might be happening? Or
I wonder about their attendance and their behavior to begin with,
yeah.
their engagements.
Yeah, and you could add that as a variable in these analyses. Absolutely. Or does, you know, and if some school doesn't, or some district doesn't see this, do they have a special program for their highly mobile? Do you all do analyses like this? Which district are you from?
I'm from Spring Cove School District.
Okay,
We're out in the middle of nowhere.
excellent.
Right there.
So at next year's PDE Summit, maybe you can present on types of analyses and we can all learn. Yeah, because that's the other thing, we learn from each other. If we start sharing this stuff, it's like, oh, somebody's doing this, maybe I can do that, you know. And using this data we've worked so hard to collect.